Hello Internet. Today's video is going to be another book opinion. Those videos in which I tell you my opinion on a book, and today's book is going to be Randoms by David Liss. This is the first book in a trilogy, and I am really excited to tell you about it. So for those of you guys who love books like Ready Player One or Armada, where we have books where it really relies on a science fiction geek for you to win at this game, then you're probably going to like Randoms. So this is going to sound a little weird, keep up with me, but this is the basic plot of the book. Zeke is a young preteen. I think he's around like 14 or so, and he's just living his life. His father loved comics and was a superhero comic writer and wrote comic stories. His father is now gone, but Zeke has continued in that fashion with his love of science fiction, of comics, of heroes, just everything that you would say belongs in the realm of geekdom. Zeke is probably really aware of it. Now one day he ends up getting taken away by the government, and it turns out that he's been picked for a program which consists of 4 young Earth children, and they are supposed to be shipped off to a different planet so that they can be tested to see whether or not Earth is worthy enough to join this gigantic alien federation. So Zeke ends up being one of the random chosen kids. So like this happens with tons of different planets that the Federation wants to potentially have join. They always pick kids in their adolescence around this age of like 13, 14. They always have 4 kids come, and 3 are always specifically picked, and then there is always 1 random to the group. Now these 4 kids are supposed to go to the Federation, rack up points so that they can kind of prove, hey, we're intelligent beings, we belong, a part of your Federation, we want to join. So that's the basic premise of it, and of course shit's gonna go down because the book would not be the book if it didn't have something bad happening. So Zeke ends up kind of being isolated from the rest of the humans, which causes him to make a lot of friends with a lot of the different other aliens that are a part of this planet, and he ends up finding out that there are a lot of suspicious things going on that the Federation doesn't really want to tell you. So what I loved most about this book was the idea that Zeke really didn't have many talents, right? He wasn't like super smart, super athletic, like he didn't have any super abilities, right? But he did have one thing going for him, and that was the fact that he knew so much about science fiction and about the whole realm of science fiction, whether it goes to deep science fiction about spaceships, whether it goes to comic book sort of science fiction. He had a lot of science fiction knowledge, and that ended up helping him understand this new atmosphere and environment he's going in. For example, when they first leave, they end up on a ship that is taking them to the planet that they are going to be learning and training at. Zeke ends up following around the captain and a lot of the crew members, and he ends up learning more about the ship. However, he asks questions based on the knowledge he already has, and when they explain stuff to him, he's like, oh, so it's like this thing, or it's like this thing, and he uses his already there knowledge about science fiction to kind of help inform him about what's going on in the world and why things work in this new environment he's living in, which I absolutely love. Like, it's a big pet peeve of mine when I have characters where I think like they should probably be knowledgeable about something, or ask questions about something, or like relate what they're learning to something else, and they never do. Like, for example, one thing that really bothers me is like saying Twilight, where Bella like didn't realize her boyfriend was a vampire, or Jacob was a werewolf, and she had to look it up, and I'm like, girl, have you never heard of vampires and werewolves before? Like, why is this such a foreign concept to you? You should have heard about these things. So I like that in here, Zeke is aware of these things, mainly through stories that he didn't think had any basis in reality, but he is using those stories and those narratives to help inform him of what this new reality is, of what this new environment is. Also, I really liked how it shaped the whole world, where it had Zeke talking to other kids from other alien species, and you really get a feel that Zeke is just as much of an alien as everybody else. I feel like a lot of times when we have science fiction books where non-humanoids are also characters, that it always feels like a us versus them with a human versus the aliens, where technically humans would also be aliens if we're living in such a special diverse place, right? So I liked how this was set up, where Zeke was very aware that he was an alien as well. Towards the end, we get a little too OP when it comes to Zeke and this girl that he knows. This girl, she kind of looks like a cat. They make a joke about her being like a Neko. And then they also make another joke about, like, on her planet he is the equivalent of a Neko, which I thought was hilarious. But there is a point where because of, like, the technology they have and, like, the things that they crack and break, it gets a little bit OP. I don't think that takes away from the story. It definitely has its moments where you're just like, you're doing a little too much there, but the progression of the story is really good. I feel like I'm just kind of all over the place with this, but the point is if you like books where the character is basically relying on their nerd skills to succeed, then you're going to like this book, because that's basically what's happening. Zeke is a nerd, and due to his nerd skills, he actually accomplishes stuff, and he's actually a pretty likable kid, so you're not as frustrated. I also like all the other characters because they also have a lot of complexity to them and how they interact and everything like that. So it doesn't feel like Zeke is the only character who's interesting. You also have a lot of other characters who have their own personalities, their own things going on, which brings more life to the story and more life to the world around. There's, like, a lot of controversy stuff. There's a lot of, like, hidden secret stuff and Federation stuff that's going on that you're probably going to be entertained by. I really liked the references. I liked how Zeke was using references that we may know as, like, sci-fi nerds to reference how he's understanding things and kind of explain in a sort of shorthand way. I think if you're unfamiliar with sci-fi, this is definitely a book you could still read and totally understand. However, it does sort of use a little bit of, like, sci-fi shorthand to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So, like, I think in this they reference Mass Effect, and, like, I've never played Mass Effect, but I've heard enough about it, so, like, I knew exactly what they were talking about. But, like, if you're familiar with Mass Effect, then you're gonna see an even deeper meaning there. So there's a little points like that, because Zeke is a sci-fi nerd using sci-fi lingo to kind of try to explain the world around him. It's going to be done in a way that you, even if you're not familiar with that subject matter, you're gonna understand what he's talking about. But there's definitely that if you already know the source material, then the references are going to mean a lot more. So it's kind of a balancing act. I think you can still read it if you have no clue about, like, sci-fi pop culture, because it does a good job using it in a way that makes sense to any reader. But at the same time, if you are a sci-fi pop culture nerd, you're gonna have a lot of fun with when he's referencing stuff and, like, figuring out stuff like that, because it was great. The only kind of downside about this book is that it does end on a cliffhanger. It was going pretty strong the whole way through. I was never really bored. It had a good progression, a good storyline. However, at the end is when everything happens and you kind of start to realize there isn't enough pages left in the book, and then at the very tail end it kind of leaves on a sort of minor to massive cliffhanger where you're just like, oh my gosh, why did you end this like that? And so if you think this book is going to be something that you like, if you think, oh yeah, I'm a sci-fi nerd, I want to see another sci-fi nerd go and be hero, then I'm going to suggest maybe pick up the next one, because you might need it. As for, like, the grade level of this, I want to say it's like middle grade / YA. It's sort of like an in-between book. It's like a tween book, if that makes any sense. I thought the whole thing was good. It was really, really good. Other than like a few parts where the characters got a little too OP at times, where I was just like, okay. Other than that, I think it was a pretty solid story. I really like the premise. I really like how it took the time to explain why things would be the way that they are, and how Zeke would explain those using terminology that he was familiar with and that you also may be familiar with if you're familiar with like sci-fi tropes and stuff like that. So The Randoms is a really, really good book. It's definitely one of those sort of, what do you call it? Those like, it's one of those wish fulfillment books, you know, like where you kind of like, man, if I was a hero, that's the kind of hero I would be. So it's sort of wish fulfillment, but it does have strong characters and it does have a strong enough plot that it doesn't just feel like fan service and wish fulfillment for your sci-fi geek nerd person. So I really liked it. I have actually already got the other two in this series, so I'm definitely gonna read it. That's how much I like this book. I think it's worth continuing. So yeah, Randoms is a good book, so go get it. Plus, one more thing, it has the number on the side. That's not really important, but it has the number on the side. Amazing. I know. I don't know why not all books do this. I don't know why only certain people are that kind to you that they number their books for you on the spine or on the cover, but this is one of those books that does. It is really hard to shelf because of that neon orange color, but it's a good book. So I want to know, is there any books that you guys think are really kind of wish fulfillment books for the type of hero that you think yourself to be? Like for me, I really like books where the character is using knowledge that they kind of have that seems like really random. Like, because I'm a kind of person, I know all about like mermaids and mythological creatures and weird sci-fi nerd stuff, and that really doesn't have any value in day-to-day life. But if I got put in a situation in which I had to fight off mermaids, girl, you know I'd win. So like, do you guys have any books that kind of fulfill that wish fulfillment for you, where you're like, that's the type of hero I would be if like it was like, if I was misplaced and put in an adventure story, I would be that character? If you can, like, if you understand what I'm asking here, because that's basically, realistically, without any like super modifications, what book do you think you would best fit in the world, and what character do you think best fulfills those wishes for you to go on some great grand adventure? So if you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those bunny buttons down below, and goodbye, internet.